welcome back to FordeeTV. I'm your host, Fordee. So guys, if you want to learn After Effects, this video series is going to be for you. I've been creating tutorials in After Effects for a little bit, and I've got friends who have said, hey, this stuff doesn't make sense. Can you help me out from a beginner's perspective? If you're intermediate or advanced, skip over this video and any other videos in the series pertaining to for beginners. Anyway, before we get started, let's talk about what is After Effects. After Effects, I like to say, is kind of like Photoshop for video, right? It allows you to animate things in 2D, some things in 3D. It allows you to do special effects. It allows you to composite things like text, images, footage, meaning video, etc., together to make it seamlessly look like it belongs. And yeah, After Effects is pretty amazing. I assume if you are wanting to learn After Effects, you kind of have an idea what it does. Let's talk about a standard workflow in After Effects, right? Now, what I'm going to discuss right now maybe won't make sense, but we are going to put it into action in a few minutes, and you will be able to reference this list of information and how it pertains to creating a standard workflow in After Effects, right? So the first thing, usually you'd start up After Effects, you create a new project, and you'd save it, right? You go up here, File, Save As, and you name it, and boom. We're going to do that in a second, huh? Next, after you create a new project, you save it, you're going to import assets. When I say assets, this could be still images, right? Like JPEGs, Photoshop files, PNGs, etc. It could be footage, which could be MP4s, MOV files, etc. It could be Illustrator files. You may import Cinema 4D 3D objects. You may import audio files, etc., right? Or not, actually, because it's possible to create a project inside After Effects without importing any assets. You could create a background with a text animation, etc., all done in After Effects, never needing to import anything. After you import your assets, or you do not, you're then going to create a composition. A composition is like a folder for these assets that you can then layer on top of each other, have those layers interact. You can nest compositions, etc., and we will get more into this later. After you create that composition, you'll add your assets to the composition. You will then composite those assets. And when I say composite basically means almost merging maybe, or making layers work together. For example, if I had a still image of myself with a cat walking from a video file, I could make them look like they belong, right? That's compositing. And animating, maybe I have a still image of a cat that is animated on screen, right? By moving its position properties. After you do those things, you're going to want to preview it, and when you preview it, you are looking to see how it's going to look when you final render or save, right? Render is a term used for saving your video file in a particular format for its destination that you like. If you're going to upload it to Facebook, YouTube, if you're going to use it for broadcast, if you are going to create a DVD, etc., right? So now that you have an idea of what After Effects is, what a standard workflow sounds like, you may be saying, well, I don't know what it looks like. We're going to get into that in a second. So up here, inside of a Mac, you'd go up to, well, let's go over two preferences that you probably want to change right off the bat. I'm not going to go over everything in these menus in this course, but we will come back and go over more information later. On a PC, you would go to Edit and Preferences. On a Mac, After Effects and Preferences, go to General, right? In general, you'll see Enable Home Screen is unchecked. When you start After Effects and that home screen is in your face all the time, it bugs me quite a bit, so I uncheck this, right? The other thing that you might want to change right off the bat is Media and Disk Cache. Inside your Media and Disk Cache, your disk cache is as After Effects create RAMs previews. And you're saying, what's a RAM preview? You're going to see shortly, huh? But as it basically does things to show you or visualize the work you're working on, it uses disk cache. Disk cache being hard drive space, right? The hard drive that I'm using is an external Thunderbolt drive that is not the same drive that After Effects is on. If the two drives are different, After Effects will run better, it will run faster, etc. So for sure, if you have a separate drive, and not a slow drive, but if you have a separate drive that you can put your disk cache on, then I would select that here by choosing folder, setting that drive, etc. I made the folder called AE Disk Cache. It didn't exist on this G-RAID, right? Also, you can set the maximum size, the default being 100 gigabytes, and that's fine with me, huh? This is multiple terabytes. So, and you can come here if you're having problems to empty that disk cache and so forth. I'm going to click on OK. We're going to leave that, and we are going to talk about the interface, right? In this interface, you're going to see that we have frames and panels, right? Over here, this is the project frame, right? And this right here, the composition view, or this is the viewer, right? And maybe down here is the timeline. Inside each of these frames are panels. So actually, this is the project panel in this view, right? Over here, this is the effects and presets panel, right? Doesn't matter if you remember these things. Not exactly, huh? Up here in the top, you're going to see standard, default, and maybe you have different workspace views up here. You could see those extra workspaces by clicking on the chevron right here. Now, yours may look different, and that's okay, huh? Remember, this little chevron, whether it's here, here, anywhere you may see it, the chevron means and more, right? It's like ... Click on this and see what else didn't fit on your screen, right? Now, if we want to adjust what we see right here, we can click on these three little lines right here and go to Edit Workspaces. This brings up your Edit Workspace window. For example, if we wanted our animation window here, we could click on that, and you'll notice it shows up here now. Now, also, if we want to create our own workspace, no matter where you are, we can do that if we make some changes. So right now, one thing that's missing over here is our effects controls, right? Something you will use all the time. Now, depending on what workspace you're in, it may already show, but if it doesn't, you'll want to go up to Window, and you'll come to Effect Controls right here. Click on that, and now it is here next to the project pane, which it normally is, huh? Of course, you could click and drag this over here. It wouldn't make sense, but you could. So you could set this up however you want. Let's say we want this to be our new standard workspace. We can come over here and we say save changes to this workspace. Now, by doing that, if we change to our default and then we come back, you'll notice Effects Controls is here, right? Notice when I clicked on default, what happened? The different things here, or the different panels changed, because in the default workspace, that's what the workspace looks like. If we click on the standard and here we come to save as new workspace, we can save this as a new workspace. Like we can call this FordeeTV workspace, right? Say okay. Now when we do it, it's listed here. What if we want to get rid of some of these things because we don't want to see them? We can come and edit workspaces, and we can drop the animation to the overflow menu. We could drop libraries down there. We could drop small screen down there, and then we can move FordeeTV on top. When we say okay, it just cleaned everything up. We can still cycle through all these workspaces. You can still access the other ones we brought to the overflow menu, and yeah. So we're going to work on the FordeeTV workspace, and there's nothing special to it at the moment, but remember, you can add things as you want. So for example, if we come over here and we select our paint, now it brought this over here. If we wanted to save this again, we could just click on this and go to Save Changes to this workspace. So let's go ahead and move on. It's not important whether this is here now or not. So whether you do that or not, it's not important at the moment, right? So we've went over how to create a custom workspace, what a standard workflow looks like. Let's go over here to the project panel. If we double click on something, it will bring it into full view, right? Maybe one of the things that you want to do here is change some of the things that are listed, right? If we right click, we can go to columns and find media duration. When we have media duration, is how long footage is. We might want to drag this over, maybe here, before size, after size, etc., or maybe even before type, right? Now, whatever we import, it's going to say how long that is. So if you bring in footage and you need to know how long it is, I think that's a good idea, huh? Type is whether it's an image, a movie file, a sound file, etc. Size, and that's good, right? We can come over here to project and double click. Now, if we start typing in here, we can find things that maybe are missing. If we just put like anything, I'll just put F, like nothing exists at the moment, but you'll see like if we're missing fonts, footage, etc. These are some default searches you can use for your project panel, right? I'm not going to search for anything. There's nothing there. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm going to come here. I'm going to delete the F. We'll click away. We'll double click on project to minimize that window, and boom, now we're here, right? So let's get started. All that time and we haven't done anything. Let's create a project, baby. So there are a few different ways to import footage, right? Obviously, we can come here, new composition from footage. I never use these buttons, but they exist, huh? You can go up to File, Import, and you could say File, multiple files, etc. I don't do that either. All you have to do is come over to your project pane, double click. When you do, it opens up a browser and you can find things to import, right? So let's import these two things right here, elephant and cardboard 16. If I press spacebar on my keyboard, I could preview this. This is just a cardboard texture and this is a PNG of an elephant. That's it, huh? You have some other options here, right? Excuse me. So for example, wow, I need some water, huh? So for example, if I was bringing this in and I wanted to create a composition based on the settings, typically you wouldn't do this. These are both image files. You wouldn't do it for an image file. You could click on this and when I import this, it would create a composition and it would drop this image file in the composition. If it was a video file, it would drop the video file and take all the settings of the video file as the composition settings. For example, frame rate, resolution, etc. Right? Right here it says PNG sequence. This only shows because this is a PNG file. Let's say I had a PNG sequence, which is basically a bunch of still files that create a video. Then I could import them here by selecting PNG sequence, right? We're just gonna press Shift on our keyboard, select the second file, and select Open. That brings both of those image files into our project, right? What did I say about saving, right? So let's come up to File, we'll go to Save As, and select Save As. Inside here, we are going to find the window that we're working with. We are going to create a new folder. In that new folder, we are going to call this Project 1, right? I'll say Create. Inside Project 1, we are going to say our first animation. Right? I'll go ahead and select Save, and now you can see up at the top right here, our first animation is listed, right? Next, whenever working inside After Effects, you need to be working in a composition. Right here is the new composition button, right? Alternatively, for if there was footage in here, you could just drag that footage onto the new comp, and like I said, it would inherit all of those settings. When I say settings, again, frame rate, resolution, and so forth from the footage. We don't have a video file, so let's just click on Create New Composition, right? And it brings us up Composition Settings. If you want, obviously, we can call this whatever we want, right? So let's call it Main Comp. You can set custom presets here, right? Or you can pick whatever you want. So right now we have it set to 1920 by 1080, which is 1080 1080 or high def resolution, especially set at square pixels. You have different options if you're working in old NTSC or PAL, etc. But typically, if you're working in HD, then you're going to work in square pixels, 1920 by 1080, or you could work in 720p, which is 1280 by 720. We're going to work in 1080. The frame rate is what you want to select. It depends on what this is being output to. If we're going to output this to Instagram or YouTube or something, then 30 frames a second is cool. However, let's say your video footage is a different frame rate. You're either going to convert that before you bring it in, or you're going to go ahead and set this to be the frame rate of your footage, right? Next, you'll see here, right, this setting for resolution. Don't worry about this. Always setting it to full is fine because this is something you can change at any moment really simply inside After Effects. It allows you, for example, if you drop this down, it allows, you'll notice again, it says full, half, third, quarter. So for example, if you're working on something that's too taxing for your machine, or you have not a very strong machine, you would set this resolution lower, but I wouldn't do it here. I'd leave this at full. Next, our starting time code you leave at 0 unless you're working with some time code from a camera and you needed that to sync up, then you could change it there. The duration is how long this composition is going to be, or how long is this, and again, when you think of composition, it doesn't necessarily mean end file, end product, but it does mean that for this particular composition, how long it will be. Again, this will make more sense as we go. This background color is only for viewing purposes. It does not get output, it's just what you see. So whatever we have here, it's fine, it doesn't actually matter. Next, over here in advanced. Advanced is just how excuse me. It's just how After Effects deals with motion blur, I believe. So we're not going to touch on this for this particular series because it's a little bit more advanced. Along with 3D renderer, right? Here you can change from classic 3D to Cinema 4D renderer if you're working with 3D objects. And we may end up working with 3D objects, but we're not going to worry about that pain for now. I'll go ahead, it's set to 10 seconds, that's fine, let's say okay, and boom. You'll notice down here, we now have a timeline for main composition, right? You also see that it goes from 0 seconds to 10 seconds, right? We have nothing in our composition, and this color right here was the color that was set when we created the composition. This color means nothing, it's only for our view. If we come right here, this is the toggle transparency on and off, we can see that technically there is nothing, because when you turn this off, if something is transparent, it will show the grid. That means that this is transparent. This is only for our view. That's very important to note. Over here inside the project panel, we can right click and we can create a folder, right? And we can call this images. It's very important that you keep things organized, right? And all I did is I selected the first one, I pressed shift on my keyboard, selected the second, and I dragged them into the images folder. That way we can see this stuff a lot easier. You'll notice that the type is folder here, right? But you'll also notice when we click on this, the type is a PNG file. Now, let's say we had a lot of assets here, right? If we wanted to find our cardboard, we can come up here, and because we called it cardboard, boom, it shows right there, right? So this is how to browse and find things easily. Obviously, what I'm showing is in a very simplistic way at the moment, but when you work on more complex, project files or animations, or compositions, you are going to have a lot more stuff in here, and if you keep it organized, it will be easier to work with, right? So I'm going to come in here to my images, I'm going to find this cardboard, I'm going to drag it down, and I'm going to release, and when I do that, now you'll see that this here is what is showing in my composition. Over here, this is a view setting. It's set to 100%, meaning this is 100% of my 1920 by 1080 pixel view, right? Which is the composition, right? If we zoom out, we can click on this, come down to 50%. Let's even bring it down to 33. You'll see this bounding box right here. This bounding box is the size of the current layer that's selected in our composition. What does that mean? That means that cardboard 16 is quite a bit larger than our composition. We could do a couple things, right? Number one, does it matter in what we are going to do for this animation? Not exactly, but let's say we wanted this to be fit to the width of this composition. We could come over here and we could do one of two things. Number one, the easiest way, right click, go to transform, and then you're going to see fit to comp width. You're not seeing it on your screen because of my screen capture the way it's set up, but it is 3 or 4 options below where this gets cut off. It says fit to comp width. Alternatively, there's fit to comp height as well. Another thing we could do it manually. We can press S on our keyboard, which will bring up the scale properties of this layer, and we can scale it down by dragging to the left, right? Now, as we drag that down, as far as getting it to snap, it's not set to snap, but we could turn on snapping right here. If we do, then as we drag this down, you'll notice that it should snap into place, right? Again, we could just right click on this, go to transform, say fit to comp width, and this is exactly the width of the comp. That is the best way, in my opinion. Next, let's talk about some of the properties that most or every layer should have. If we click on this arrow right here, you're going to see transform. Transform properties are the bread and butter of After Effects, right? All the stuff that you animate for your layers is typically going to be here, right? Your anchor point. Your anchor point is basically how these other properties work together. We're going to go more in depth on this later. You got position, which is where it's located in your composition. Again, let's bring this from 33%, our view. We could say fit up to 200%, and when we do that, right now, 100% fits exactly. If we change by clicking here and dragging, you'll notice that it's set to fit up to 100. You could say fit, which will go up to whatever you want, or fit up to 200, or we could change it here to 100% because we have actually more space. But again, as we change this, maybe that changes, Next, so we have position. Position is where it's located in our composition. We can drag things around like this, or if we have our selection tool, we can click and we could drag it around, right? I'm going to press Apple Z twice to undo that. Next, we have our scale. Our scale is our size of this layer. We have rotation, right? If we turn this, we are rotating it. You'll notice that there's a degrees here, and to the left of it, there's a multiplier. This is how many rotations. So if I set this to 1, that means 360 degrees. If I set it to 2, it would be 720 degrees. Now, if I set this to 1, you're not going to see anything happen, right? And that's because nothing is being animated. If I drag my playhead, nothing is being animated. We are going to get into animation in just a second. I'm going to set it to 0. We don't have to worry about these properties too much because in our second video of this series, we're going to go into this in depth, making changes, etc. Opacity is exactly that. At 100%, it's fully opaque. At 0%, it's transparent. And in between, any percentage you want, right? I'm going to close the transport out of here, and we are going to go over some things that maybe you want me to spend a little bit more time on, but the point of this is just to get you an idea of the workflow of working in a project, not to learn every little menu item, etc. We are going to get more into it later, so don't worry, right? So, here we are. We have this cardboard. Let's come up here. This is our tools palette. Lots of different tools, right? This particular tool right here is the pen tool. If we start clicking with a layer selected, it's going to create a mask. A mask is basically something that will show or hide whatever is selected by the mask. So let me show you. What we're trying to do here is create a ground plane. So if I click and I drag, I create Bezier handles, right? If I don't click and drag, if I press Command Z and I just click, now this point doesn't have Bezier handles. That means the next time I click, it's just going to create a straight line. Now, alternatively, I could come over here and I could click and drag, and the Bezier handles will allow me to create a curved line from this new point. However, this point, because it doesn't have Bezier handles, because I didn't click and drag, then this is just straight from this point. I'm going to press Apple Z 3 times, and I'm going to show you when I click and drag, if I click and drag in the direction I want, that means I'm going to create a curvature in this direction because this handle is going up, right? So if I come here and I click and I drag, this is not exactly a tutorial on using a pen tool. The pen tool is the same in Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, etc., even Final Cut. So if you know how to use it, perfect. If you don't, look up a tutorial on how to use the pen tool. But what we're trying to do is mask out this bottom portion. I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to come up here, and every time I'm clicking and dragging, and doing something like this. Now, if I press spacebar on my keyboard, it brings up the hand. I can click and I can drag down, and I can come here and I can click again, right? Now, notice I just click once because this particular point, it doesn't have to be curved. I'm going to press Shift on my keyboard, click here, and that will make sure that this line is straight from the last point it was on. I'll close my mask path by coming over here, and you'll notice that little circle on the side of the pen tool means I'm closing this puppy out. And what happened? It basically hid everything else. Well, I'm going to go ahead and press the space bar to drag this back down. And a couple things you should note, right? Number one, it's okay that the mask went outside of the areas of the composition because sometimes you are going to animate or do things or whatever. And now in the end, this doesn't show up when you render. All that shows up is what shows inside this composition, right? So now if we come over here to our layer, you're going to see now we have masks. If I click down here, these are all the mask options, right? We're not going to get heavily into masks in this particular part of the tutorial. We will get more into it later, but I'm going to show you real quick that there is a difference between add and subtract, right? Now, if we say this part of the mask is subtracting this and it's leaving the rest, right? We don't want that. Add is what we wanted. Again, we'll get more into this later. I'm going to go ahead and twirl down these arrows and maybe we can adjust this mask. Now, if we want to adjust this mask, we should come over here to our selection tool. And if we click on a particular point, we can now, I'm going to press spacebar to move things over. We can now click and drag this. Now, if we just wanted to drag, or if we just wanted to move one of these handles, if we press Option, notice that I can just move this one handle, right? So making this more straight. Does that actually matter in this scenario? Not exactly, right? If I want to move the whole mask shape or path, what I can do is double click on this. It will select all of the points, and now I can click and drag this down, right? What if I want to, now if I press Enter, it commits that. It was already committed, but to be able to access these points, what I can do is come here, press Shift, it deselects the points, then click here. Now only this point is selected. I can now click and drag this here. If I want to select and move this point, I can click and drag this here. maybe something to this effect. I'll double click on one of the points. I'll drag this down a bit more, something to this effect. We'll press enter and boom. This is now our ground layer, right? What we're gonna do is create a scene for that elephant to walk through the forest, etc., right? So here we are. But you're saying, hey, this is just, it's brown, it's cardboard. It doesn't look like grass, right? We're not in the jungle, what's going down? Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we come over here to effects and presets and we can start typing an effect we want to find. Alternatively, you could come up to our effects and you can find the effect that you're looking for. I have a lot of effects that don't come with After Effects, so you may not see the same thing. In fact, for sure you won't, unless you have the same effects that I have. Huh? A lot of these can be purchased from different manufacturers that extend the functionality of After Effects, right? So over here in Effects and Presets, if we type or start typing tint, which is the name of the effect that we want to use, you'll notice right here under color correction, we have tint. I can come and drop this over the layer. I could drop it in here, but if you have a lot of things in your composition, you might drop it on the wrong thing. I always prefer to drop it on the layer, right? After we've done that, basically what the tint effect does is it remaps the white and black values of your image. It tints all the black stuff to black, it tints all the white stuff to white, and the grays are in between. Huh? If we come over here to this color, the white, and we remap it to green, for example, now we have like a greenish grass, right? If I click on OK, this is now our cardboard green grass. Looking cool, baby. Next, if I come over here to this cardboard layer, right, inside of our main composition and press Command D if you're using a Mac, Control D if you're using a PC, what that does is it duplicates the layer, right? It duplicates everything, right? By clicking on this little visibility or eyeball icon, we can show and hide the layer. Notice when I show and hide, nothing happens because it's basically the same thing stacked on top of the other. I can prove that by clicking on the eyeball here and then clicking on the eyeball here. It's the same thing, huh? So cool. Next, you'll also notice that if we were working with audio, there would be a little box here to turn audio on and off. And I will explain the next two after we make changes to this bottom cardboard PNG. Next, why don't we rename these things, right? So I'm going to come to the first one. I'm going to press enter on my keyboard, and I can type, I don't know, grass. It's not really grass, but grass, right? When I click it to show it, I can come over to the next one, press enter on my keyboard, and I will say sky, right? In the sky layer, the first thing we want to do is twirl down here, select the mask, and press delete. When we do, it fills everything. It doesn't exactly fill it. The grass layer is still on top, but it's exactly the same color, right? So if we select the sky layer, come up to our tint in our effect controls, because remember, it copied everything over when we duplicate it. We'll click on this, and we will remap our white to maybe a blue. When we say okay, now we see our sky layer looks like this, right? Looking cool. One of the things that maybe you say is, okay, this is cool that this lines up, but maybe you don't want it to, right? Let's say we want to flip this. We can create a full scene here just using this cardboard texture by making certain changes, right? So on this sky layer, I'm going to click on this arrow. I'm going to click on it again. You'll see under the transform that we have our scale here, right? Now, of course, we could have accessed it just by selecting on sky and pressing S. That brings up scale. Real quick, I'm gonna twirl all the transform open to explain. You can access all of these with the first letter of their name except for opacity. Opacity is accessed by pressing T on your keyboard. So if we wanna bring up anchor point, we would press A. If we wanna bring up position, we press P. If we wanna bring up opacity, we press T, etc., right? We want scale. Let's say we want position, we'll press P, and we want scale. I'll hold shift on my keyboard and press S, and now scale and position are shown, right? So the first property here is your X, which is left to right. The second property is Y, in position, is up and down, right? In scale, it's the same thing. This is the scale across, and then the scale up and down. If we wanted to change this to flip this in its current orientation of the sky, we could this is a link, right? It's saying that if we make a change to the XY, it makes a change, or make a change to X, it makes a change to Y. If we uncheck this, we can come over here, click once, bring our cursor to the beginning, and put a minus sign. When we press enter, now we've just flipped this. It's still 38.4%, which remember is the width of our composition, but we've now flipped it. And notice now this doesn't have something to line up to, which, okay, that's nice, huh? Because what we're trying to do is create some difference. Next, again, we're going to apply another effect. And don't worry about learning every effect right now or remembering the names. I'm just trying to show you what you can do in a project. And this is a fairly simple project, right? So if we come over here to Effect and Presets and we type in turbulent or start typing in turbulent displace and we click and we drag and drop this on the sky, you'll notice that it starts creating this wavy pattern because it's applying a noise to the image or footage, etc., based on this amount. Now, if we crank this up, now this is starting to look a little bit like Starry Night, right? Awesome painting, right? So here we are here. That looks pretty cool. We've got a sky. We've got a ground. Let's create a sun, right? If we come over here to the grass layer, we're going to press Command-D to duplicate it. I'm going to press enter on the grass that's below, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to press enter and call this sun. We can come up to this first one and press enter and get rid of the two just for organizational purposes, not like it makes a difference, right? And in our sun layer right now, one of the problems that we're experiencing is that we have the mask here. We want a different mask. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this mask, right? Next, on this layer, I'm going to press T on my keyboard to bring up opacity, and I'm going to drop it down by dragging to the left. When I do that, I can see through because now I'm going to make a change, and I wanted to see where the sky is and where this ground is, right? I'll come up here to my tools, and I will select my ellipse tool. If you don't see the ellipse tool, if I click and hold, maybe you're seeing your rectangle tool. All you have to do is come up to this tool, which is right next to the pen, click, hold, and bring it down to ellipse. Now, when I do that, this can create shape layers, it can create masks, etc. If you have a layer selected in your composition, which right now I do have the sun layer, which really is just a full screen of that green color, I could click and drag over here. And now I've created a circle, an ellipse. If I press shift on my keyboard, it will constrain its aspect ratio to be a circle. If I don't hold shift, then I can make this any type of ellipse that I want. Huh? So I'll press shift, boom, something to this effect. Now, if we come back to opacity, bring this back to full, it's at 100%. But I've never seen a green sun, right? So let's come over here to map white to in the effect controls. Now, if you were in project, all you have to do is click on effect controls and make sure you are in the sun layer. Change it from green to yellow, right? Or yellowish, whatever. We'll say, okay, boom, now we have this layer. What if we wanted this to glow a bit? We can come over to our effects and presets and start typing in glow. And obviously there are a lot of options. Plus I have a lot of third-party glows, but come down to stylize. This comes with After Effects, the glow. We'll drag this onto the sun and boom, it starts looking like this. We're just gonna create a few different changes. We're gonna bump this up to a 5 intensity, maybe set the radius to 20, and maybe drag this to 35 or 30, and maybe even bring the glow, the intensity to 10. And the glow radius to 40, something like that. Now we have this bright sun. It doesn't even look like cardboard anymore, right? So, and that's cool, whatever. Now we've got our sun, that's awesome. And let's do our first animation, right? So right here in our timeline, remember, this is 0 seconds, this is 10 seconds. We want to animate the position of this sun. So I'm going to come over here to the sun layer. I'm going to press P on my keyboard, which brings up the position properties. And right here on frame 0, we don't want it to be here. I'm going to press spacebar so I can click in my view, drag this here, and that way I can now, with the sun layer selected, the selection tool selected, come over here and I can drag the sun maybe down right here. You'll say, wait, now we can't see it, right? I'm going to zoom out to 50% so we can see more stuff on the screen. Press spacebar and click and drag down, and now we see this is our composition. Our sun is out of view, right? If I click on this stopwatch, the stopwatch next to any setting that you see is how you enable animation, or so you enable to create keyframes for that particular parameter, right? We want to animate the position. I'm going to click on the stopwatch here, then I'm going to drag my playhead all the way to 10 seconds. I'm going to click and drag the sun to be right I don't know, right there. And when I do that, because I had already created a keyframe here, it created a secondary keyframe because I moved the playhead to a different point in time and made a change to that value. Next, one thing that you'll see is there is a little Bezier handle right here, right? If I click on this Bezier handle, what I'm doing is I'm changing the trajectory, and you can see it show here. This is the motion path that's happening from the sun. I'm gonna press Apple Z, and I'm gonna scrub my playhead just so you see. This is a linear move from point A to point B, right? Point A being this first keyframe with this value. Granted, we didn't type this in. We just moved the layer right there. Then we move forward in time after enabling the stopwatch. We made a change and we moved the sun here and it created this motion path, right? If I am on top of one of these keyframes, I can click on this Bezier handle like this. And now when I drag this, notice that the sun curves its path. One of the things I might want to do is come over to this keyframe and make sure that I drag this up. And now I have a nice rounded movement of that sun. What if I want this sun to be more to the right? I can make sure that I'm on this keyframe. Now, if I'm here, for example, and I make a change, it's going to create a new keyframe, and the value of that is the parameter of position that's on this keyframe right here will not change. So just for example, if I click and I move this over, now going from here, it will go back to where it was. Another thing you'll notice on the screen is here, there are a lot of dots so close together, it almost looks, well, it looks like a solid line, right? Here, the dots are more spread apart. And what that means is this point, right, to this point, there are a lot more keyframes. And this animation is going to happen a lot slower than this animation. Now, I'm doing a screen capture. Setting this to full with what's going on here is probably going to take a while to render. And we talked about previewing before. There's a couple different ways we can do this. So if I bring my playhead to the beginning right here and I press spacebar, you'll notice that it is now caching out this animation. It happened very quick in the quarter res, right? And you'll notice, boom. So as soon as this part right here, very slow to happen. As soon as it happened here, bam, because there is not a lot of time here in our timeline to go from this point to this point. That's why these dots are further apart. I'm going to press Command Z a few times to get back to this point, right? Again, we're not going over too much stuff about keyframes. I will add one more thing. Actually, no, let's do that later. So now we have our sun, which animates on screen, super cool. What about our elephant? Let's come up over here to our project pane. Let's look for the elephant, which exists right here in the images. Let's say we didn't know because there was too much. We can come into the search and start typing elephant, and there you are, my friend. Before I bring it in, I want to show you something. Let's double click on elephant real quick. And what did that do? It opened up the footage right here inside of our viewer. You could see that it's a separate pane or panel than the composition, right? Over here in footage, you'll see that I have the elephant. It's on transparency. If I uncheck this box, it doesn't look right? But there's no background here, which is perfect because you don't want to remove backgrounds in After Effects. Of course, you can do something called keying, which we will cover later. However, because the background is black or was black originally, I removed it in Photoshop. So anyway. So I'm going to close this out by clicking. If you had multiple ones open, you could click here and you could select other footages. So like again, if we come here and we get rid of elephant, we open up images and we double click on cardboard, you'll notice that I can come over here to the footage portion of my viewer, click, and I could toggle between the different things that are open here. I could of course close them by clicking on this X, and now I'm in this composition, right? So let's come over here to our project pane. Let's find the elephant however you want, and let's drag this down, right? So we probably want this elephant to go on top of everything, right? So it's now here. Let's say we wanted it to animate from the left side to walk over, right? And walk, we're not going to animate its feet. That's way more complicated than a beginner tutorial, but who knows? Maybe we do intermediate, advanced stuff later. Anyway, so the first thing we want to do is we want to change which direction he's looking at, right? So if we come over here to the elephant layer, excuse the sirens outside, right? They're going to get someone. Anyway, So if we come over here to the elephant PNG, now again, we could rename this by clicking on it, pressing enter, and typing elephant. And anyways, it was named elephant.png. So all we're doing is getting rid of that PNG, right? So if we press S on our keyboard, remember in our scale, if we want to turn something around, we unlink the two properties. And if we set this to -100 and press enter, now it's looking the other direction because we're saying we want the scale to be -100. If we want to turn it upside down, you'd come here and put -100 and it would flip it upside down, right? So now that it's here, that's looking mighty fine. We have our selection tool selected. And why are we working at 50%? Let's bring it back to 100. Hey, elephant, how you doing, buddy? So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to drag it off screen. And you're like, wait, I missed the elephant. I do too. Don't worry, we'll bring him back. Let's select the elephant layer, press P on our keyboard to bring up position. Let's make sure that our playhead is at frame 0. If we are here on frame 10, I'm going to do it just to show you, right? And I click on the stopwatch, then where do I go, right? Because really we want this to start from frame 0 and come in. So I'll press Command Z. We don't want that. Of course, another thing, instead of pressing Command Z, right here, I click on the stopwatch for position and I realize I'm in the wrong space. If I want to put this somewhere else, I could just drag this keyframe over. Another thing that I could do is I can turn off my keyframes by clicking on the stopwatch again, and whatever this setting is, it will be applied through the whole timeline. So if I click on this, nothing will happen. The elephant stays there, it gets rid of the keyframes, and now I can move my playhead back to 0 and create or start the animation by turning on the keyframes by clicking on the stopwatch here. Let's say that we want this elephant to come in to maybe here when the sun starts coming up, because the elephant likes the sun. Don't we all? Man, I miss summer. It's winter right now. Anyway, so we can do one of two things. We can change the X property here. We could click and drag. Now, if I click and drag, remember I could move this both in X and Y. If I press Shift on my keyboard, it's going to constrain to the original movement that I started. And what I did is I started dragging to the left first, and so by pressing Shift, it constrained that movement just to left and right. If I had started moving it up and press Shift, it would constrain that movement just to up and down. So if this is where I wanted to start, perfect, right? So now what happens at frame 0, no elephant, and in 4 seconds, the elephant's there, the sun keeps going, and here we are, right? Another thing we can do to preview, of course, we can press spacebar on our keyboard, and you could start the preview wherever you want. You bring your playhead here, press spacebar, and it's going to go ahead and start caching this out. And okay, that's nice, that's cool, whatever. Did we need that? Or another option, if we bring our playhead back to the beginning, over here, there's a preview pane, right? Or panel. You can click on this button right here. And what this is going to do is this is going to cache all this out. Remember, to your media cache that is set inside the settings of your inside After Effects, right? Remember, I have it set to an external hard drive. It's saving all that. Number 2, you'll see up here, it says playing from RAM, and it's only playing, 12 to 15 seconds, 12 to 15 frames per second. Remember, this project is set to 30 frames per second. We could verify that by coming over here to the project panel, clicking on main comp, right-clicking, and saying composition settings. And you'll see that it's set to 30 frames per second, right? So now that we have this cached out, how could we tell? Look here in the timeline. You see this green bar right here? This means that this is all inside RAM. So when I press spacebar, this is playing in real time. You'll see 30 frames a second, real time. Looking mighty fine. Let's say that we want to save this out, right? And remember, I'm doing a screen recording right now, so it looked like it dropped a frame for a second. But okay, even this is a simple animation. It shouldn't do that. It's because I'm doing screen recording on top of this, right? Anyway, so yeah. So let's say that now, what's the final step? We've previewed it. We want to save this so we can put it on Instagram. We can put it on Facebook, YouTube. We want to send it to our grandma, who will be impressed because she doesn't know about computer. Or anybody, right? So what you want to do, once this is set, you make sure that your composition that you want to render or save to a video file is selected. You come up here to composition and select add to render queue. When you do that, number 1, it basically created a project here in the render queue from main comp. Remember, main comp is the name. You could have lots of comps here. Make sure that it is correct. Main comp is what we're looking for. We're not going to go over all of the settings right now. Again, this is just for workflow. The best settings, we're going to leave it all there, right? resolution here, full. Remember, if we had set this to third or quarter, and then we created the composition right here, you'll see in this second one, it's set to full still. So it didn't matter that we made a change to this. Now we have a duplicate here. We could select one of them, press delete, it gets rid of it. But just for your reference, let's say you're just trying to see what a final reference file is. And again, we'll go over this settings later. You could drop this down. It would create a smaller resolution file for you and it would render faster. We're gonna leave it there at best. The lossless settings are fine. Again, we're gonna get into those settings later. The only thing you need to worry about is where do you wanna output this to? When we click on this, we are going to figure out, hey, where are we gonna save this? We're in our folder After Effects for Beginners in Project 1. We're going to double click. We're going to create a new folder and we are going to call this Render. That's a good habit to organize things properly in your project files, etc., right? And maybe we're going to call this Main Comp or Elephant Animation 01 or 001. Obviously, if you're working on a big project, you may go through many iterations, and naming it with some type of number value will allow you to look at the different ones to see the changes, or maybe go back to a previous one, etc. We'll go ahead and click on Save, and Save didn't do anything. It just changed the name here in our render queue. Next, we'll go ahead and click on Render, and you'll notice it's moving quite quickly right here, right? And so this should finish up in just about a second. All right, so it's done. I went ahead over here. I opened up Project Run. You're going to see our render settings here. You're going to see that I have our elephant animation. I'll go ahead and double click on it. You'll notice it's quite large, huh? Obviously, if you want to go ahead and make this smaller for Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, whatever the case might be, you are going to use Adobe Media Encoder to make it smaller, to render it to MP4, etc. But I'll double click on it anyway. That's going to launch VLC for me, and we are going to see there is our pretty little elephant animation. What's up, buddy? And probably you're seeing this glitch a little bit, not just because of the screen recording, but because this is a 1.75 gigabyte 10-second file, right? If we create a MP4 from this, it would play smoother. That's just something to take note of. Guys, I hope you liked part 1 of learning After Effects with Fordee, baby. That's me. I'm your host from FordeeTV. And hey, in the next part, we are going to get more in depth, working with animation, layers, keyframes, blah, blah, blah. Guys, if you found this tutorial helpful, useful, etc., please like, share, subscribe, share with your friends. It means the world to me. Until next time, I'm out.